to be able to chat and talk. I do a lot of teaching and interacting on social media. I know some people don't like it. I love it. I have a love-hate relationship with social media, but I really do love Instagram, where I get to go live with people and have them chat with me in real time. So if you have a question, please put it up in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, let me know. Because when I go into presentation mode, it doesn't like allow me to see the chat at the same time. So I have to click a box, but I'll be checking it periodically. So if you're like, hey, I want to say something, or hey, I have a question, you can either type it in or you can ask to come off, and then you can ask your question like now. I really prefer that. I'm not a wait till the end type of presenter or person. I really want you to ask now, because if we get to the end, it really doesn't have the same amount of like oomph, or it doesn't have the same amount of relevancy when you get to the end, and then I have to flip back through slides, and it just kind of gets us all kind of discombobulated. So I'll go into kind of telling you who I am, what we're going to be talking about as it relates to the therapy cards, and I'm going to show you what they look like. And then we're going to talk more about mental health stuff during today's session. And then we're going to use the next 2 times that we meet, the next 2 days, to really dive deeper into the resource. So you'll get a chance to see how they look. You'll get a chance to see what the questions are like, so that when you get them in your hands, you'll be able to kind of put it all together and make sense of how to use the product for yourself, and then how to use them with people that you're working with. Okay, perfect. So I'm Dr. Ebony. I'm gonna go ahead and bring up my screen. I'm gonna go ahead and share. Here we go. All right, and then I'm gonna go into presentation mode. So like Erica mentioned, the name of our talk today, and that we're going to keep in mind over the next couple of days, is Surviving a Pandemic. We're going to talk about managing grief, along with all kinds of other stuff. So we won't only be talking about grief. We'll talk about depression, anxiety, loneliness. We'll talk about some food stuff too, and you'll figure out why when I introduce who I am. And then we're going to talk about how to manage all these things so that you can reclaim your life. We're going to talk about self-care, how the tools can be used to help you sort of ground yourself more in your own self-care practices, as well as talk to the people you're working with about how to start a self-care routine that helps them manage a lot of the stuff that's going to come up. So I want you to keep in mind, as we are going through our session today, that caring, this quote by Audre Lorde, caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is actually an act of preservation. It is an act of political warfare. And I want you to really sit with that, really think about what those words mean. A lot of times we grow up and people tell us, hey, you're selfish if you take care of yourself. You need to put other people first. You're a servant. You need to serve other people. I knew I heard that growing up. But in the time of all of the things that are happening, world crumbling down around us, the world being on fire, all these things that's continuing to happen, to take care of ourselves is an act of political warfare and extreme radical resistance, and it's self-preservation. So we really can't afford to not take care of ourselves, is what this quote is actually getting at as well. And to go against all the things that's meant to break us or keep us oppressed, to take care of yourself is actually a radical act of resistance and political warfare. So who am I? I'm Dr. Ebony. I am a licensed psychologist based in Texas. A large part of my practice is centered around helping Black women and other women of color recover from trauma that's happened at the hands of somebody else, or race-based trauma, helping them find their voice again. A lot of times in trauma work, you probably have seen this, witnessed this, or even experienced it yourself. When trauma happens to you and your body, it almost seems like something comes in, basically cuts you in half, cuts your body off from your head, where we now either live totally in our minds. You ever heard somebody say, I'm always in my head, or I feel things so deeply in my body? Trauma comes in and disrupts our body's ability to stay grounded and have that flow of communication happen from our mind to our bodies and our bodies to our mind. So some people totally live in their heads, some people totally live in their bodies, and we can move back and forth, but that constant flow of communication, that constant flow of grounding doesn't typically happen when you've had something like trauma happen to you or you've experienced it. And we're talking about trauma. Most people, when they hear trauma, they're thinking about something catastrophic, like hurricanes or accidents or interpersonal trauma like childhood molestation, sexual assault, sexual abuse, domestic violence, things like that. Yes, we are talking about that trauma, and that's the trauma that I also work with in practice, but also race-based trauma, microaggressions in the workplace, racism in the workplace, stress, being asked to do something, being paid lower for what you're asked to do versus somebody else who's doing the same job or who may have the same title and position as you. Fearing for your job on a constant basis. I know I work in Austin where there's the tech industry is huge here. And there's a lot of people who work for tech companies and have been told that your pay is contingent upon your performance evaluation. And if you can think about just how unsteady that is and always thinking about each quarter, will I have a job? Will I not? That is not a great place to live in. And that's not a great place to promote grounding because you're constantly just in survival mode, doing the things you know you feel like you need to do in order to keep your job, keep your quality of life, keep your housing, keep your basic needs met. And so you find yourself in this constant, I call it emergency room responding, where you're constantly responding to emergencies and constantly performing. When the body doesn't have an opportunity to slow itself down, we find this disconnect happening and people are totally living just in survival mode from one moment to the next without any real grounding. So that's the kind of stuff that we're working on in our work together in sessions and helping people find their voice, advocate for themselves, find their power again, because trauma does come and disrupt our ability to feel empowered and our abilities to use our voices to speak up for ourselves. A lot of things happen as well with trauma. We learn to mistrust or we learn to not trust our own judgment sometimes. So helping us get back to the place where we learn to trust ourselves and other people again. Outside of being a psychologist, I'm also a food relationship strategist. Again, my sole focus and area of focus and population is working with Black women, other people of color, helping us to regain a healthy relationship with food. Diet culture, since its sort of beginnings, have dictated what we eat. It has dictated how we look at our bodies. It has dictated what we think and view as healthy. A lot of those teachings have destroyed our relationship with food and destroyed our abilities to listen to our bodies. A lot of what we were taught centers around diet rhetoric, which is you should not eat that, this is going to make you die, or you shouldn't look like this, or you're going to die. So a lot of fear mongering related to a lot of the foods that we eat or how we see our bodies and experience our bodies in relation to food. So a lot of disruption has occurred for many of us to where we don't even know how our body feels, when we're hungry. A lot of us don't know how our bodies feel when we're full. If you grew up like me, I grew up in Mississippi and I was told that I needed to eat everything on my plate or kids in Africa were going to starve. That is literally what I was told. And y'all can put in the chat if y'all were told that or something similar. Or I was told that you need to eat everything on your plate or you can't get up from this table or you're not going to be able to do this. So food, the relationship that I built with food was around me getting in trouble or me causing something detrimental to happen to somebody else. So that doesn't go away just because I become an adult. I actually become an adult who still engages with food from that place of I'm going to get in trouble or people are they're going to die because of me. And so I have this strong responsibility to consume all of my food. So now I don't have an internal system that tells me when I'm full. I only have an external system, which is my mom's voice, my auntie's voice, my grandma's voice around you're full when your plate is clean. So now I don't know how to listen to my body. When I'm full, I only recognize fullness from a clean plate. And so getting back to being able to listen to our bodies, because messages like that has disrupted that ability to do so. It's disrupted our innate abilities to just eat food. And also a lot of diet culture also takes away our cultural relationships with the foods that we have that are central to who we are. So a lot of those things a lot of diet culture's messaging has been around foods being bad, our foods being bad for us. So think rice, grits, pork chop, ham, bacon, all those things, greens, all those things being told that they are bad for us and then being imposed on us some superfood of some sort, typically European in nature. So it comes in and wipes away our abilities to even feel rooted in our food or our abilities to even trust our own cultural teachings, our own cultural upbringings. And so we then gravitate towards these other ways of eating that then is in alignment only because we were told that that makes us more worthy or more valuable. And so that too is what continues to make us mistrust ourselves and not listen to our bodies. And so that connection between mind and body is not there. So as a relationship strategist, food relationship strategist, I do a lot of this educating with people around, listen, a lot of the things that we were taught were not true. They're not accurate. Actually, the research is skewed really around what's healthy, what's not. Actually, a lot of the things that are happening in the medical industry have been happening because of anti-Black roots. And I'll give you a book that you can read at the end of this too, that talks more about that. Right. And so a lot of you are saying, like, I heard that before, starving children all over the world, they wish they had your food, so you need to eat. So a lot of the work that I do is us unlearning that, us calming ourselves down to realize that those messages are not true and getting back to just building a relationship with food that's not rooted in you should eat this, not that, but that is built around abundant mentality versus scarcity mindset in a nutshell. I'm also a business consultant. So in addition to doing those things, I help other mental health professionals build and grow their practice, mainly creating impact in the online space, mainly diversifying their income as it relates to coaching, scaling, that kind of thing. And then I'm the creator of my therapy cards. It's the first self-exploration and self-insight card deck specifically created for Black women. And that resource line actually grew to include Black teens and now Black men. And we have a journal and other 2 edition cards to go with it. So this is what the cards look like, and y'all can tell me if y'all don't see them. But this is the women's deck, and this deck was created first to help Black women take up space in the mental health industry, to give us permission to own the space that has often criminalized us and often made mental health access almost impossible for us. So I created I use the questions that I ask my clients in session, and I put them in a card deck so that people could have access to them wherever they are. And they could feel like they're talking to Dr. Ebony or a therapist or psychologist, even though they weren't physically talking to them. So that's what the women's deck looks like. And then from that, people are like, well, what are you going to do about the teens? And so we created a deck for teens that has more relevant questions to people in this age group. And then we created the deck for men because we cannot leave our Black men out, and Black women won't let me leave the Black men out. So they're like, well, what are you going to do about the Black men? And so we created a deck for Black men as well that are relevant to being men. And so there are journals to accompany those too. We have this journal, and we'll do a deeper dive into this. I just want to show y'all what they look like. So we have that journal to accompany the women, and we have a leather bound one too that we use that's gender neutral or that men can use. So pretty much is different than the spiral, a little bit more comprehensive, but gender neutral as well. Okay. So thank y'all for the kind words. Thank y'all for the kind words. And so we are going to go into what the meat of this particular talk today is going to be about. We're going to talk about the pandemic along with other crises. We're going to dive into other traumas that we've experienced. If you feel triggered, if you feel like this is too hard to listen to, or you feel like you have some stuff coming up, I do encourage you to step away, go take care of yourself, and rejoin us when you're grounded. I'm going to show us a grounding exercise to start so that you can go back to that when and if you need to step away. We're going to talk about some common mental health issues. We're going to talk about how you can normalize the experience for yourself in a way of providing validation to yourself so that you can let yourself off the hook of being able to of being held accountable to your perfectionism. Because I know if anybody is like me, our perfectionism tries to hold me accountable all the time and tries to make me outwork my current capacity. And we're going to talk about how to normalize and quiet that. And then we're going to discuss resilience and coping and how you actually start the process of reclamation. And then I'll give you some tools and resources, and then we're going to open it up for discussion. So before we get started, I want everybody to kind of take a moment to take your hands wherever they are. I know some of us may be typing, taking notes, but take your hands wherever they are and sit them on your lap if you're able, with your palms facing up like this. And I want you just to have your hands open on your lap, and we're going to take a couple deep breaths so that we can allow our bodies to ground and center. Take a deep breath in. Blow out. And really blow it out to where you can hear it. In through your nose. out through your mouth while your palms are still facing. See if you can lower your shoulders, relax your limbs. Take another deep breath in. And blow it out. Take a moment to allow your breath to return to its normal pattern. And allow it to slow. Reminding your body that it's safe. Reminding your body that it can be here, giving it permission to be here. And reminding yourself that everything else that you might be worried about, either before this time or after this time, give yourself permission to have that wait while you enjoy this moment. Take another deep breath in and blow it out. And you can rejoin. Find your space here if you close your eyes when you're ready. And we're going to proceed. Okay. So throughout the course of this past 2 years, I was talking to Erica before you all came in, and I was like, how much do you know about the information that people have received related to the pandemic and other traumas? And, how much have you heard about the pandemic? Because I know since 2020, many of us have probably been bombarded with pandemic talks, or a lot of us have been bombarded with like self-care talks. And so I just want to make sure that I'm speaking to people who either this will serve as a review for, or will serve as something that feels helpful because we haven't heard it in a long time. And so if you haven't heard any of these things since 2020, this is a great refresher. It's a great reminder of what you can do for yourself and the things that may be coming up for you that you may not have been able to connect. So since 2020, we've had so many things happen. Of course, COVID-19, and it's still happening. It's not happening as much, thank goodness. And it's still happening. Now we've seen a breakout of the flu across many of our communities. And so people are still getting ill, and people are still sort of in a state of fear as it relates to, is it COVID? Is it the flu? Is it a cold? I don't know what it is. So we have this uncertainty that continues to loom. And if anybody knows, the fear of the unknown is something that creates a lot of panic and stress in folks. And so you still have that's weighing on people. The care of their families is something that they're very, very concerned about, and that can weigh heavily. There's a lot of social justice stuff that is happening. I mean, when we think we closed the book on one thing, we've opened it to another. We continuously are exposed to one thing after the next, right? We had Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, we had all that stuff, all those uprisings in 2020. And right when we thought we would get out of one, we're moving into another. Right when we think we are resolving one, another thing is opened. And so this most recent thing that we've had to experience, whether it weighed heavily on you or not, is the appointing of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, right? For Ketanji Brown of Supreme Court Justice. And that is so, I know for me, and y'all can let me know if y'all felt this. I know Lizette is saying yes, but let me know if y'all felt this, like watching that, being exposed to that, having to witness somebody be berated, ridiculed, undervalued, devalued, degraded, like in plain sight for somebody who looks like you, Black or brown person. It was hugely triggering, hugely traumatizing. So when you experience that, and when you experience other things, such as witnessing something happen to somebody who looks like you, it brings up other memories. So if you felt yourself being agitated, if you felt yourself being anxious, if you felt yourself being stressed, if you felt yourself being irritated, annoyed, tired, fatigued, it could be because you were witnessing that. It could also be because some other stuff that you had laid to rest or that has settled was coming back to the surface. And that's the way trauma works. Right when we think we have resolved something, we are triggered, and all the things come up. It's almost like shaking a snow globe. So you could have dreamed about something during this time that happened in 2020. You could have had migraines. You could have had inflammation set into your body. So a lot of this stuff that happens around us doesn't happen in a vacuum. It doesn't happen in isolation. So all of these things are continuing to create stress in us, even though we've moved past them, because it keeps happening. Right. So the social justice awareness isn't a one-time 2020 event. It continues to happen, and we're continuously reminded. And the more we have awakenings to the things that have happened in our world, the more we have awakenings into how to recognize racism, the more these things become triggered in our bodies. Also, political events and issues like the appointing, but also just I had this conversation with some clients last week. Also, just reckoning where we are from the election. A lot of the things that were promised through some folks have not happened. A lot of the things that people had hopes about have not happened. A lot of the consequences of the major election actually is creating stress for folks, either on their jobs, laws, policies. Things that people were hoping for as financially are not coming to pass. So a lot of these stressors are still very present for folks. And if I live in Texas, and if y'all know anything about Texas, our government does not sleep. It continues to throw something at us all the time, something new. That's like, oh, y'all thought y'all were okay. We got something else for you. Y'all were settled. We got something else for you. So there's always something coming up about trans rights, something coming up about women's rights, voting rights. So there's always some impending infringement on people's rights here in Texas. And so we're constantly on guard. We're constantly watching to see what has unfolded or what new developments there are because of the clients that we work with as therapists and social workers and mental health providers and advocates and the sort. So we just always have to have our awareness on and have our caution kind of up and our guard up, because we need to know how to protect our clients and advocate for their best interests. So these things also create some feelings of not being settled in our bodies that we're having to deal with. And what does this do to our mental health? It completely exacerbates anything that you have going on. I want to give you some stats just so you'll see where we are. In the summer of 2019, there was a survey done on adult Americans and how they felt about their mental health, anxiety and depression in particular. 1 in 10 people said that they experienced issues related to anxiety and depression. That was in 2019. By June of 2020, the pandemic had happened, or we were in it. 1 in 3 adults were now reporting that they were experiencing difficulties related to anxiety and depression. That continues to be the trend in 2022, right? And so we're only going to see more exacerbation from this time period of our lives, more impact, more consequences. So it's important that we know what that looked like before. It's like when you go to the eye doctor, they tell you, we need to take your baseline. So we'll know that if anything happens, we know what the baseline was. Our baseline prior to the pandemic was 1 in 10. Now it's 1 in 3. So more than likely, when you are working with folks, while our screening measures may not have been updated or some have, it's going to be important that we ask specifically about depression and anxiety, what things have changed for you over the past 2 to 3 years. It's going to be a question that we have to ask. That is not anything that's on, I know working with trauma survivors, it's not on the PCL, it's not on the post-traumatic symptom checklist, but we need to be asking these questions. And this is how you also decolonize therapy and mental health for yourself, as well as for the folks you're working with, taking into account all of these things. Are there any lingering effects from the year 2020? Are there any lingering effects over the past two or 3 years that you're dealing with? A lot of people had children come home. A lot of people had to become had to take on several roles. A lot of relationships dissolved, a lot of financial stress. Asking those specific questions, even if they're not included in your intake instruments, because research shows that the mental health issues are being exacerbated. Working with first responders was one of my jobs. I actually just left my full-time job in March. So I'm a full-time entrepreneur now. But working with the city, I was working with firefighters and EMS. What we know about first responders is that their risk for developing PTSD is increased because of the amount of re-exposures that happen in their jobs. They're constantly re-exposed to trauma, tragedy, near-death experiences, or witnessing death for folks, witnessing people's worst days. And because they are repeatedly exposed to it, their risk for PTSD, depression, anxiety setting in is higher. We know that about first responders. And so now you take us as everyday civilians, we're like, oh, we're not repeatedly exposed, and we are. At any given moment, you can open your Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, and see violence happening to another body, or read about something that's happened to another body. You can turn on the news and see the court proceedings of people being appointed to the Supreme Court and feel triggered. So we're constantly being exposed. And as mental health providers, we're constantly hearing about people's worst days. As advocates, we're constantly hearing about the trauma that people are experiencing. So just like first responders, we're also increased risk. We also have an increased risk for PTSD because of that repeated exposure. Subway shooting in New York happening right now. Yes, I quickly saw that. Thank you, Erica, for mentioning that. I quickly saw that on Instagram and I scrolled through. I was like, okay, I can't think about that right now because I had to come do this. But yes, so now something else has happened, right? And so we're constantly exposed. So if you're a person who's breathing and listening to this right now, your risk for PTSD is increased because of repeated exposure in the same way that first responders are. That is significantly important because we have to remember that when we are assessing for different things for the people we're serving as well as ourselves. When we are screening ourselves for what is happening right now, why am I so agitated? Why am I so upset? We need to scan our bodies and remind ourselves of this very data. Oh, you're constantly exposed, which leads into the conversation about what are we doing to take care of ourselves that is going to come later. Okay. If you are a person who has experienced sleep disruptions, it could be because the issues have been exacerbating. The difficulties in sleeping have increased to 36%, people's changes in eating 32%, and increased alcohol use and substance use, worsen chronic illness since this time. People's migraine experiences have increased, back pain has increased for folks. One of the things that we know about difficult emotions is that they lodge themselves in parts of our bodies, like our hips, our joints, our backs. We have a lot of stress tension that happens with our heads. So if you're a person who already had back issues and you notice that over these past 2 or 3 years that has gotten worse, this could be why. You could be experiencing physical pain related to some mental health issue. You could be experiencing chronic pain related to some emotional exacerbation. For me, I didn't have hip issues until the pandemic. And that probably is because now I spend a majority of my time sitting down. And so now I have to stretch a lot. I have to make sure that I'm not sitting for too long. So there are some things I have to do to help myself out, but that stiffness has definitely occurred and has happened. Inflammation in my joints, right? So if I'm sitting too long, I may start to experience, I had a lot of knee issues during the pandemic, where my knees would become inflamed and I would just feel like I had just torn an ACL or something. I would be limping. None of this ever happened before. And I was way more mobile. So that may be an issue, but also I was experiencing a lot of stress. I was experiencing a lot of disruptions in sleep. My body was going through a lot of changes with not being as mobile as it once was. And so all of these things were happening. What we do though, is instead of kind of attributing these things to the mental stress that we have, because some of us may not know, is that we then go into the mode of, self-criticism or self-deprecation, where we are talking down on ourselves or we're holding ourselves to the standard of who we were prior to 2020. And we start saying, well, why can't you do this? You're only 39. Why is your body already breaking down? And so we start to kind of have these negative talks with ourselves or say these negative things to ourselves. And honestly, it could be just related to some mental health stuff that needs to be worked out as well. 41% of adults report significant anxiety and depression symptoms, compared to 11% from January to June of 2019. So you see that skyrocketed number. So here's some things that we commonly experience, and y'all can let me know just in the chat if you experience some of these or there's something that I left out, please let me know. But increased anxiety. excessive worry. And I'm going to use myself as a case study because I just feel more comfortable doing that than anybody I work with. Excessive worry, obsessive compulsive behaviors, insomnia, racing mind. My anxiety is crazy now. I've always been an anxious person. My mom is anxious. My dad is anxious, although they don't have the language to call it anxiety. We are anxious people. But since the pandemic, my anxiety has shot up, and my anxiety has shot up in the area of safety. So I want you to think about the work that you do, the things that you hear, and how you are taking in those things and what that could be doing, or kind of what are you doing to help yourself resolve some of that stuff. So as a person who works in trauma, a lot of the things that I hear are related to people's physical body being taken advantage of or their physical integrity being impeded on. And so I'm hearing a lot of stories of danger. I'm hearing a lot of stories of people being put in compromised situations, hearing about people being targeted at work. And so all of this stuff just sits with me. And typically I've done a good job of filtering that stuff out and not taking that stuff home, right? But then in 2020, home becomes my work. Home becomes the work. So there's no car drive that I have to get to. There's no decompression as I sit in traffic. It's literally walking from the office to the kitchen here, to the kitchen to the bedroom, to the bathroom here, right? And so now I don't have a lot of those moments to decompress, to filter out. So some of this stuff really lodges itself into my body. And so there are some things that I do to get rid of it. And sometimes it gets the best of me, just like any other human, right? So I've had to spend a lot of time over the past 2.5 years in therapy myself with my therapist. I go every other week, and it is something that I feel like I'll be doing for the rest of my life just because it's so helpful. And as a mental health provider, this is one of the things that I think, need to talk more about, especially as people who are supposed to be the helpers, also making sure that we have the help in place for ourselves. I was just talking to Erica too before y'all came in. I love true crime, love 2020, love snaps, love all the things, but also hearing that and that being something that I love to watch, also coupled with the things that I'm hearing in real life, don't make for a very easy place for my anxiety to feel grounded and settled. It actually just exacerbates and blows all that stuff up like a snow globe as well. So making sure that I'm paying attention to what I'm consuming, giving myself some limits, putting some things in place that will help me feel more balanced has been key. So that anxiety actually comes up, and a lot of people have experienced that. Depression, being excessively sad, feeling like you have chronic low energy, sleep disruption, crying just out of the blue, feeling this extreme amount of hopelessness. Hypervigilance, being overly cautious, checking the news, meaning Facebook and Instagram, and like doom scrolling is what we call it. So now that the shooting has happened, some people may engage in doom scrolling. They are going to try to find all of the information because anxiety tells you you should know all the things. You need to know all the things in case something happens. So it's always working out for your worst case scenario. Being easily startled, suspicious, and avoidant. Increased irritability, becoming easily frustrated, having low patience, being snarky, cynical, skeptical with your friends, family, children, yourself. Is something that a lot of people experience. We talked about that increased pain as well. And the quality of life too takes a hit. Difficulties with parenting, confusion and uncertainty, like what is going to happen? What next? Am I safe? Can I go out? What is going to happen with travel? Hopelessness, anger, fear, numbness, like not feeling anything. One of the go-to coping skills for a lot of people, is, especially people who we're working with, is going to be this numbness. It's something that people learn how to do so that they don't feel anything. So if I can't feel pain, if I don't want to feel pain, so in order to not feel pain, I'm not going to feel anything, because not feeling anything feels safer and is more manageable, and I can get on with life, or at least live moment to moment, right? Reemergence of past trauma. A lot of people have experienced the emergence of things that happened to them when they were younger coming up, and they can't figure out why. They keep having these reoccurring dreams about something that happened when they were little. They can't figure out why they're now dreaming about grandma's house and they haven't been to grandma's house in 20 years, or why have they had that dream about that aunt? They don't know why. that aunt came to them in that dream or anything like that. They are finding themselves just having memories that seem odd to them, but memories that have been stored and pressed down. Increased stress, loneliness, low self-esteem. So our friendships are, I feel like for the most part, getting back to a place where we feel like we can have a social life. People are more outside now than ever, or I say over the past 2 years. So that feels really good to folks to get back to that normal. But also some friendships have taken a hit, or people no longer hang out in ways that they used to, and people are just learning how to be around each other again, how to feel comfortable, how not to look around every time somebody coughs, that kind of thing. And so we're learning how to reacclimate to what was something that we knew. We're learning how to reacclimate to it in a way that is going to be a little bit new for us, yet taking in some of those same old patterns and trying to feel some normalcy again. Tony says, I totally get that. I used to watch Law and Order to see abusers get caught. Yes. Using it to cope. Yes. And yes again. And therapy helped me find different coping skills like journaling. I love that, Tony. Thank you for your transparency and sharing that. A lot of times we're looking for our own answers in other people's lives, right? We're looking for our own answers in TV shows. A lot of that feels super validating. When you never had that happen in your real life, it feels super validating to see. It gives you hope that the justice system will work and it will work for you. And so we turn to these shows to kind of get answers. So that totally resonates. So thank you for sharing that. Also, a lot of us start to feel like we don't have control over a lot of things. Like when this shooting happened, I was like, oh my God, what next? Feeling trapped, feeling stuck, feeling like we're in this never-ending cycle of doom or of things happening. Although I know that life is very different and things can happen, and that there are some moments where there's extreme joy. Moments like this make you feel like, or make you think that things are not getting better. Marital relationship difficulties, some people are experiencing, some people have split in relationships, some people have gotten into relationships. So figuring out how to adjust to these new chapters, these new transitions is a huge thing. Boredom, like feeling like, oh, I've used to travel for sanity. Now what can I do? There are limited places I can go. Where else would I want to go? I had this whole bucket list. And so grieving, which we'll get into in a second, the loss of some dreams, the loss of some things that we thought were going to happen. And then financial strain, money being tight now with inflation and grocery prices and gas prices. A lot of people are having to now choose between, do I go to therapy or do I go get grocery? Do I get gas? Do I buy gas? Or do I pay for my medicine? So now people are having to choose when they already have limited resources, which puts a huge strain on people's emotional capacities. And then now when we're talking about grief, having to grieve the loss of so many things. And this is what I want to talk about with normalizing. A lot of the ways of living life that how we once knew it, is not the same for us. For some people, like I remember talking to first responders, they were like, well, nothing really changed for us. So everything has still felt the same. So they may not have as significant of a shift in their lives occur. But for a large part of us, we've had to grieve the loss of children's proms. We've had to grieve the loss of graduation. We've had to grieve the loss of birthday celebrations, travel normalcy. We've had to grieve the loss of just being out and talking like with people freely without worrying about exposure to some illness. I don't know if you've done this, but think about watching a show. I catch myself doing this all the time, and this may be a testament to my own anxiety. I'm watching a show and people are on a train or on a subway or they're walking in some park, and I was like, oh my God, look how close they are to each other. Like, we really did that? Like, look at that. And so having this increased anxiety too around the way things used to be, and now seeing it from a different lens has been the case for us and so many other people we're going to work with. Like, I have this anxiety, I don't know where it's coming from. So as we talk about grieving and decolonizing therapy, it is important that we validate our and people's experiences. We can't say, this is not a place for us to impose our own beliefs. That's silly. You don't have to think about that. And I know you know that, but just to reiterate, yes, that's scary, is what we can say to people. Like, we literally did live like that, but we lived like that because we didn't have anything to fear. There was nothing like this that existed. So we can validate and also provide new information without totally shutting somebody down, right? Tony's like, yes, I know I'm looking like y'all, we did, look how close we were. Look how close they set us at restaurants, that kind of thing, right? Look how close, like we can literally, people are talking that we don't know, and we literally are talking all over each other's foods, right? So that is a thing. Erica said, I do the same thing watching old shows. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that was a thing. So now all of our perceptions of the world around us has been jaded. It's been colored by this new thing called the pandemic, right? And so now we're experiencing the world from that place. We're experiencing the world from a place of losing some things. We've lost relationships. We've lost the ability to just go in and not have to worry about these things. We've also gained a lot too. And so having to adjust, even if you're in the process of gaining, the adjustment can still be stressful. Think about a new home, a new apartment, a new car, a new schedule, a promotion. While these things are great, they still come with some stress as you transition, because you still are shedding the old ways of doing things in order to learn something new. So that grief process may feel different and it's still there. So we're having to now, like, great things that have happened, we've come to know, like, we can have meetings anytime, anywhere. We don't all need to be in the same place, which also creates Zoom fatigue. We can also, like, talk to people all over the world. There are so many things we can do. We have movie night with our friends. We can have digital dating experiences. So we've gained a lot of things, but also that new normal comes with some transition periods that can be uncomfortable. Looking old pictures of family celebrations, right, Lizette? And like, I wish we could do this again. Like, we were not worried about a common cold. We were not worried even about the flu for many of us. We were not worried about talking to people and fluids exchanging. It just was not something that was brought to our attention or something we had to worry about. Now, you can literally become laser focused on, oh my God, you literally just let spit go from your mouth. Where is that going to land? Like, literally coming down to that amount of anxiety, right? And what's going to happen? People becoming overly concerned with washing their hands, washing their clothes, that kind of thing. And so now having to build that into what their life will look like. How do I build this into my life to where it's sustainable? Is this going to be sustainable? And for some of us, we have to make a decision. That's not sustainable. It was needed during that time. It's not needed now. And that's also a conversation we can have with our clients. Like, yeah, we picked up some things that we needed to survive the time that we were in. And it's okay as we move forward to start shedding some of those things as they no longer serve us in the ways that they once did. As we normalize the experience, I want to bring up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For a lot of us, we were operating at the self-actualization phase prior to all of this happening, or prior to any traumatic experience. You can just think about one that really stands out to you. We were really achieving our full potential. We were working towards it. We were on the move up. We were being creative. We felt like we had hope. That's self-actualization. The only reason we were able to occupy that phase of the hierarchy was because those things below it were met or had enough organizational leverage to them that we could operate in the self-actualization phase. So maybe you weren't concerned about food, which is the only reason you were able to be creative. You weren't worried about water and rest and warmth and shelter. That's why you were able to be creative and come up with that new idea, come up with that new product, get that promotion, be the highest performer in your department. You weren't worried about your security or safety, which is why you were able to engage in a relationship and have that relationship work out. You weren't worried about where you're going to lay your head, which is why you felt accomplished. You were like, I'm going to put in for this promotion. I'm going to nominate myself for this job. All of these things helped us to be where we were, many of us, prior to 2019. I know for some people, things only got worse for them because things were already hard. And for some people, things went drastically down because these other things were in place. And then for many of us, probably all of us, this thing got turned on its head and we became worried about food, hence the running to the grocery store, buying up all the food. We became concerned about having our basic needs met, security, safety. We were worried about, our relationships. We can't talk to people. We can't be around them. So we lose the confidence. We lose the ability to feel close, and we start having to grieve a lot of those things. And not to mention, a lot of us had people pass away. And so a lot of us are still grieving that loss over those 2 years, the impact that that loss have had on family dynamics, family structure, the loss that that has had on the hopes and dreams we had for kids, and people lost parents, and they'll never experience what it's like to be a grandparent. They'll never experience what it's like to walk their children down the aisle, that kind of thing. And a lot of guilt sets in for people too. I know a lot of women I work with too struggle with fertility. And so this thing came up around, well, now I'm able to get pregnant, or now I'm carrying, and now my mom that I lost will never be able to be a grandmother because they passed away during the pandemic, or now they won't ever get to see it, or the guilt around I waited too long. Now they won't ever get to do it. I should have done something sooner. I should have had a child sooner. So working with our clients around, hey, I know that you feel this way. I know you're trying to make sense of it. And here's what has happened for us. And so let's normalize using this model, what you might have been experiencing. Maybe back when your mom wanted you to have children, maybe you didn't feel safe enough. Maybe you didn't feel accomplished enough. Maybe you were waiting. So that is why you didn't do it. And then you decide to do it now. And unfortunately, these things have happened. So bringing that into the conversation around, I know you can feel guilty, like there was something you could do, and your brain is trying to make sense of what happened and trying to fill in the puzzle pieces that don't seem to quite be complete or feel complete to you. So this may be something that you're gravitating towards. Thank you, Lizette. My husband had to say goodbye to his mother over an iPad. Right? I'm so sorry, Lizette, that y'all had to experience that. Like, it's horrible. So we've had to not feel that closeness. So grieving those last moments, grieving what we thought our goodbyes would look like, what we thought they would sound like, and then just having to reckon with the time and place that we're in. Yes, and so I'm so sorry to hear that, Lizette, and I'm happy to, like Erica, hear that you're able to support him through that. And I know that, he continues to try to get through it too, because it's not like a moment in time that passes and then we're fine. We continue to try to manage it. So we could need continued support around that too. So resilience is the capacity to recover from difficulty, from toughness, right? As we talk about the things that people have had to experience, many of us have had to build a sense of resilience out of survival. Many of us have had to just survive. And many of the reasons that we're so resilient now is because we've been operating in survival mode. We've been operating in, I need to be here, I don't have a choice mode. My hope for us, as we recognize that all of this stuff is true, and yet and still, we make a conscious effort to be resilient. Back to that R.G. Lord statement, we make a conscious effort to be resistant. We make a conscious effort to resist grinding and hustling and always needing to be all the things to everybody, but we take a radical interest in preserving ourselves. We take a radical interest in making sure that we are resilient from a place of settlement and just settling versus always kind of operating in survival. And it can seem difficult to not operate in survival mode when you're constantly exposed. So one of the things that I will talk about with first responders is that, yes, from moment to moment, you're dealing with some sadness, you're dealing with loss, you're dealing with the potential of loss. And how can we then build ourselves back up to the point where we at least have some grounding in between that? Or if you can't get grounding in between that, how do you get grounding at the end of the day? But making sure that that is something that is as high a priority as our work is. I know for many of us, we have our work up here, family up here, but we don't have grounding and feeling settled in our bodies. Usually anywhere on that list, we're just like, what do I have to do? Self-care. Maybe we take a moment on the weekends to do some things that bring us joy, but what can that look like as something that's built into our lifestyle? That's the resilience that we're talking about. And that's going to look like radical self-care. It's liberating, yet challenging. Okay. So it's liberating because it says that I am important, I matter, I deserve to be well. Basically is what we're saying when we're talking about radical self-care. I deserve to do the things that I need to do as a person, taking up space in this world. However, given the lives that a lot of us have built, it is hard to insert ourselves as an item of importance. We have work, we have clients, we have children, we have partners, we have parents, we have siblings, we have community groups, church, we have youth groups, organizations, we have resource groups. We're serving on the board of this or that. So our time is already deeply borrowed out or loaned out. to folks. And so it's hard to kind of find that time for yourself. And I encourage you and even challenge you to try to see where that can happen to you. And I know that even talking about where it can come in, I want to acknowledge that a lot of what I might say comes from a place of privilege of a person who doesn't have children. So I have a little bit more time on my hands, from a person who now works for themselves. So I don't have a time I need to clock in for anybody else. So I want to acknowledge that I'm talking sometimes from a place of privilege. So if there are some things that you find doesn't fit, please let me know. This is not a place where I want you to feel like it's not welcome. It's totally welcome. And just help me to understand how you find that time for yourself. And so for people who don't have the same level of privilege, that may look like it's few and far between. I was talking to a colleague today who's a single mother, and she was sharing with me how she hit a brick wall yesterday, just from having to go. She hit a brick wall Sunday. So she just having to go. And she was like, I literally ran away from home. I literally went somewhere else. I was scared. My child was scared. My mom was scared, but I left, right? And that will happen for so many of us who don't have access to the resources that will help us manage our time better, or will help us better balance the responsibilities and the responsibility to ourselves. So for her, that wall has repeatedly happened. I'm repeatedly hitting a wall, repeatedly. So the conversation then turned to, well, how can I then make a plan for myself that mitigates or interrupts this wall that I keep hitting? And so what does that now look like? So it doesn't look like the same thing that it would look like for me taking 30 minutes in the morning to stretch, or taking some time at night to decompress. For her, it would look like scheduling in a Monday, couple hours, once a month, where she just gets to do nothing, not work, not tend to a child, not do anything, but tend to herself. And while that can't happen every day, she's looking at it as a way that she can build it into a month-long self-care program or a month-long self-care plan. And that is what it has to be for most of us. Everybody doesn't get the luxury to do something for themselves every day. So I want you to think about what that could even look like for yourself. If you're not already prioritizing yourself, what does that look like for you? What could that look like for you? And I would love to hear what some of that is. And while I love like getting our nails done, getting our hair done, taking bubble baths, watching our favorite shows, I love that stuff. And I'm also interested too in what are the other things that we're doing that has to come from a deep place down of self-care, like going to therapy, scheduling our doctor's appointments, getting the follow-up exam that we know we need, saying no to people, backing out of appointments that we know we can't make, canceling meetings, saying no, I can't make that, or setting boundaries. Also those type of self-care things, because those are also self-care, setting boundaries, saying no, backing out of meetings, canceling appointments. What does that look like for you? And how do you make that a lifestyle thing for yourself versus something that you do only as a reaction to you hitting a wall? How do we get in front of that and make that something that we know is coming, just like we know that wall is coming, right? Just like we know, okay, every 3 months I hit a wall. How do we get in front of it to say, okay, well, if I know that about myself, here's what I'm going to do every 2 months so that I don't do that. I would love to hear what that sounds like. Also being realistic with ourselves and our abilities. Prior to 2019, maybe you operate, or prior to 2020, maybe you operated on a baseline of 8, 10 being like you were perfect. Like there are no things that you could not accomplish. You were operating at an 8. You were on time, on target, on task. 8. 0 was that you were totally not present at all. And you were not hitting any goals. You weren't operating as the person you want to be whatsoever. So say you were an 8 in 2020. Well, now, after all the things that have happened that we've named and some of the stuff that's still happening, some of us have moved down to like a 5. But we're still expecting ourselves to operate at an 8. Are you being realistic with yourself and your abilities? Yes, you probably would like to be a 9 or a 10. And are you being realistic with what your 5 self can do without judging and beating up your 5 self? Maybe you are now a single parent. Maybe you are now a 2-parent household. Maybe now you have less money because you have to spend it on other things. Are you beating yourself up and still trying to operate at the capacity that you once did? Or are you giving yourself credit for being the 5 and taking yourself from there? For a lot of us, sometimes as perfectionists, it's really hard to see yourself as a 5 or as a 4, and being able to operate at that place. We want to hold ourselves to that 8, 9, or 10. Many of us hold ourselves to that 10 and expect to operate from that place. So we may stack our schedules. We may say, yes, or I have white space in my calendar, so such and such can go there. Or I know I said I was going to go be quiet and take a walk for my lunch, but I can take a walking meeting. Or, you know what? I know I said I was going to get off at 7, but I'm going to work till 7:30. How many of us are still doing that for ourselves and continue to chip away at our own abilities and continue to chip away at the resilience that we're trying to build for ourselves through self-care? Tony says, I purposely try to keep Mondays free. I may not even answer the phone unless it's my husband. I also make sure I see my therapist twice a month, but I would love to run away for a day. I love it, Tony. Love that you have a day to yourself. Love that you are allowing yourself space and you're recognizing for yourself, I need this time. I deserve this time. And I'm going to take it without judgment, with full permission. And I encourage you to figure out at what point can you run away for a day and what that would actually look like. Maybe it starts out as an imaginative exercise, something that you do to kind of just escape mentally. I would journal it out for, and this, y'all, many people can do this too. I remember starting a business coaching program because y'all know we don't learn this stuff in school. We don't learn how to be business owners in school. So I was taking a business coaching program. And one of the things that she had us do was write out what we envision for ourselves long term. Really get super detailed, so detailed about it that you can even envision the vacations that you would take and what they would feel like on your days off. I encourage you to do that, Tony, and other people. What would that day to runaway look like? What would you wake up doing? What would it feel like? What would that coffee taste like? What would that first sip feel like? What would you be wearing? What type of day would it be? What weather would it be? Where would it be? Would it be raining? Would it be cold? Would it be snowing? Would you be on a mountain? Would it be in a cabin? Really allow yourself to escape that way, because I truly believe that resilience is created, and us reclaiming our life is recreated by what we imagine for ourselves. Because if we can imagine it and if we can write it out in vivid detail, we can most certainly make it happen in one way or another. And so we may start to build in small escapes for ourselves, like, oh, I have to have a hazelnut coffee in the morning. I have to have it just this way. So I'm going to give myself full permission to have a hazelnut coffee in the morning. And I'm going to drink it, and I'm going to have a baguette to go with it, or I'm going to have a muffin to go with it, and it's going to be great. And so when we can do that, we can start escaping in small chunks throughout our lives to where we can work our way up to that day. So I encourage you to do that for yourself. The Zet says, reading my Bible. Yes, meditation, spending time with God, started getting up early. When the house is quiet, to exercise and just sit. Yes, that meditative time, that renewing, that learning also resets us. And so these resets that we can get moment by moment is what continues to build up our resilience from a settled place versus a place of survival. And also, when we're more settled, the grief that we experience, the loss that we are experiencing, although real, doesn't seem to have as significant of an impact as it does when we're completely zonked and wiped out. Which is the next point, filling your emotional tank. Drawing, cooking, baking, puzzling, knitting, coloring, watching TV. Right? I love to watch TV. But what I know to be true is that I can't watch true crime all day because that doesn't fill my emotional tank on a Sunday, right? So I remember one time I was like, why do I feel so bad? It's pretty outside. I don't have anything going on. I'm supposed to be relaxed, but I feel like crap. It's because I have been watching Snapped all day. I've been watching people murdered all day. Of course, you're going to feel bad if you've been watching people murdered all day. So I had to take inventory of that. But I was only able to recognize that because I slowed myself down and asked the question, what's happening? What is wrong here? So I invite you to take inventory of your life in that way. And that's also self-care. Slowing down enough to where you can, what is happening here? What am I doing? What does this feel like? And you're taking inventory because that awareness brings you out of survival mode and puts you in the present moment. Because survival mode is honestly escaping the past, trying to dodge the future. What am I doing just to kind of like get by? How can I dodge the next trap? So how can I be settled and make decisions from that place? Checking in with yourself is what I just talked about. Do you need help? Do I need other people to help me? What are the things I can do to help other people if I genuinely derive pleasure from helping other people? What are some things that I can do and what's my capacity? At an 8, maybe I could go help mom clean up her house. But at a 5, all I can do is tell her, hey, I'm going to pay for a cleaning service for you and let them do it. Or usually I would go over there and cook or take her a meal. Hey, I'm going to send you Uber Eats today. That's all I can do. So based on where you are, what can you do? And that is self-care. Because if I'm still thinking, oh my God, I have all these things on my plate and I promised mama that I would bring her a plate, or I promised such and such that I would bring the baby to the party. All I can do is, hey, I'm going to send a gift, or, hey, I'm going to pay for you an Uber to go somewhere that you want to go, or I'm going to pay for gas for you. That's all I can do. And that's what my 5 self can do. Okay. Tony says, can you repeat what you said about survival mode? Yes. Survival mode is us operating like the past, trying to forget the past, running away from the past, or ruminating about the past, or over-examining, analyzing the past, and being worried about the future, trying to dodge the future. That is what survival mode is. We're constantly trying to negotiate our safety, our physical safety, and our place kind of in this world, right? But from a place of haste, right? From a place of anxiety, from a place of worry, from a place of threat. So we're like, oh my God, so if that wouldn't have happened, so you may find yourself thinking, well, if I would have did this, then this wouldn't have happened. If I would have just said that, then that would have happened. And it doesn't have to be 20, 15 years in the past. It could be yesterday where we're thinking, oh my God, why did I say that? Did they think that? Did I make a fool out of myself? Should I have said that differently? That's the past. And then the future is, what are they going to think? What am I going to wear? What are they going to think about how my body looks? What are they going to think when I go to speak? Are they going to think that I don't know what I'm talking about? Those kinds of things. Okay. And we can do this with great recency. Yesterday and then tomorrow. Doesn't have to be so many years behind. Erica says, I need to do that for myself. I need my 5 self to order a cleaning service because I cannot. I fully support it if you can. I fully support it. Resilience. Growing up in Mississippi, I was taught that, and I say Mississippi because I know a lot of this is geographically relevant. I was taught that I needed to be as domestic as I could because that is what made a good mom and a good wife. So when I could not clean my house on Sunday and prepare for the next week, and I was finding myself getting burnt out, I felt like a huge, huge failure. What is my mama going to say about me not being able to clean my house? I live by myself, still worried about whether or not my mama knows I didn't make my bed this morning or not. But those messages, just like anything else, just like trauma that sticks with us, just like those messages around food, they don't leave just because you reach an adult age. Okay. So these things we're constantly having to work out. So if you're at the place now where you have the ability to ask for help, pay for help, outsource help, those things, then do it, because that is also how we build resilience. I can focus on other things that I need to take care of and that are important to me and that bring me joy if I can do other things and pay for a service where somebody could help me. Okay. So that may be necessary. And I know a lot of people can't do that. Everybody can do that. But there are other things that we can do. Some people absolutely don't like doing hair, so they outsource the person who does their hair. Some people can't do nails, they outsource their nails. Some people can't shop for themselves, they outsource that. So what is it that you can do that will help you clean your plate, metaphorically, clear it so that you can allow yourself to move up a notch in your baseline functioning? That is what we want to talk about or think about. Normalize and validating experience is a great way to cope. Socializing and connecting is a great way to cope. Releasing yourself from that perfectionism, that guilt, that shame and establishing structure and routine. Sometimes for a lot of us, it is so important that we have something to look forward to and know how our days are going to be. For people who have experienced trauma or working with people who've experienced trauma, bringing routine into the conversation is going to be imperative. Why? Because if you are a person who has experienced trauma, working with somebody, the unknown is super, super, super scary. So if we can add a little bit of control to what is going to come the next day, or something that people know is going to happen every day without fail, helps people to feel more grounded. Routine and structure is so important for people who've never had routine and structure. It can help them feel safe. It can help them know what's to come, especially for people who are always thinking about the future. That structure and routine and being able to rely on that can promote grounding and your body being settled. It is also important that we talk about, okay, now that we have a structure and routine, is there enough flexibility in that for you to make changes as they need to be happening? We don't need to become solely married to, because I know some people who are rigid, people who are perfectionists, it's like, this is my structure routine, I can't deviate from it. We also need to save space in our conversations for ourselves and with our clients, the people we're encountering or interacting with. Is there a space though in this structure routine where you can detach from it if you need to? Or is the structure and routine going to be also the thing that takes you under? Because we don't need that to happen, because then now it doesn't serve you. So engaging enough flexibility in your routine that it doesn't become something that sucks you in or smothers you, but something that you can tweak and change if you need to. Okay. Prayer, meditation that we just talked about, that Bible time, that moment where you're able to just stretch, move, walk, let it be quiet in the house. Things that you can do for yourself that helps your body feel settled. Encouraging people to engage in therapy, teletherapy, coaching. Everybody's not going to like formal therapy, and that's okay. It is, as we decolonize therapy, we also have to remember that everybody does not like formal therapy. Everybody is not going to be okay with receiving help from a licensed professional. There's still some stigma and there are still some triggers that happen for people as they sort of encounter and interact with the medical system and the mental health system. So we have to be aware of that. Working with sexual trauma survivors, I remember talking about appointments that needed to be made. One of the major appointments for women is a gynecological appointment. Hugely triggering for so many folks. Hugely triggering to have somebody probe all around in your body when that has been the very thing that's made you feel violated, right? So talking about how can we get this done in a way that allows you to feel safe? What does that look like? That is what it means to decolonize the practice. What does that look like? Let's explore, instead of saying, we're going to teach you some breathing exercises that you can do while this happens. Let's talk about what you want it to look like. How will this experience make you feel safe? What is it that will make you feel safe? What is it that will make you feel comfortable enough to actually go to the appointment once it's scheduled? What do you need the waiting room to look like? What do you need the staff to act like? What do you need your doctor to say to you? What do you need to say to your doctor? And so in my work, what I've done is also built networks with physicians so where I can ask them, do you practice in this way? If they're not receptive, then maybe our work with the client involves us finding, we spent a whole session, yes, a whole therapy session, finding a provider who they can go to, going through their insurance. Maybe that's the help that they need. All formal therapy will tell you, or interventions will tell you, that you go through some model. This is what you do. You talk to them about why they feel this way, challenge thoughts around why they feel like what they feel or why they think what they think, challenge those irrational thoughts. Sometimes those thoughts are not irrational. Sometimes those thoughts are very real. And there are doctors who could trigger and exacerbate what clients are experiencing. So as a therapist, I've spent whole sessions combing through insurance, trying to find a provider who at least felt like they would be a lot more comfortable for this person to even start making an appointment with. And that was the session. And that's what it means to be in community with our clients as well, right? Teletherapy, coaching. Would it be helpful for you to talk to a coach versus a therapist? There are coaches that therapists are in network with and community with that might better serve your client than you. Would that be helpful? Talking about nourishing foods, not from the standpoint of diet or what did you eat? You know, you can't eat that, you know, you can't eat this, but how are you adding in foods that make your body feel good? Whether it makes it feel good from a physiological standpoint or makes it feel good from a comfort standpoint. What is it? right? Because a lot of decolonization requires that we understand that a lot of what we're taught about food and medicine also is rooted in anti-Blackness and rooted in very colonized ways of thinking and sort of intellectual understanding. So how can we add in foods? If you're a person who's feeling lonely, you have a client who's feeling lonely and grieving home, what's a food that you can add in that will make you feel like you're home? How would a warm tortilla feel? How would eating some tamales feel? How would eating some greens feel? How would going to eat some fried chicken or biscuits make you feel? How can we add that in? But if we're operating from a colonized perspective of food, we're going to talk about adding in nourishing foods from did you eat veggies? Did you eat a salad? Did you drink water? Maybe you should juice. Maybe you should do a smoothie. We're going to talk about all those diet ways of engaging with food versus a more comprehensive view of what makes you feel good. Are the talks about diet and the foods that we need, are those foods off limits? No, but that can't be the only conversation that we're having with folks around smoothies and juices and, don't eat greens, but eat this. Don't go for a second helping, do this. We can't be spewing that and call it decolonized. We got to talk about the whole picture. What makes you feel like you're home when you're missing home? Oh, baking my grandmother's pound cake recipe. Do that. Do that. Right. And so having to wake up in the morning with the smell of fresh bread, do that if that makes you feel like it's a warm hug. And also talk about ways that we can broaden the scope of foods that we're consuming, right? Versus taking out and engaging in restriction and scarcity. Okay. Lizette said, yes, that's what it takes. Literally meeting the client where they are and what they are in need of that day. So good. And we have to do that. The thing that I want us to remember too is we can do that for ourselves. We can meet clients where they are, and we can also meet ourselves where we are. So as clinicians, I'm a huge, huge advocate for the same things that we teach our clients that we can practice ourselves. So what makes me feel close to home? What makes me feel hugged and warm? What makes me feel settled? You know what? I was going to drink this smoothie today because I know I want to lose 5 pounds before my vacation. But you know what? I'm going to go have me a croissant because that makes me feel good. And so wondering, like talking about ourselves, giving ourselves permission to take up the same space that we encourage our clients to. Okay. Also limiting your access to issues that are going to make you feel less, sort of make you feel less available emotionally, make you feel less tapped into your emotions. I know that there will be times that we won't always be in perfect alignment with our emotions, but those times that we can be and plan for, that's what we need to have happen. And those are the things that we have control over as we're coping. So maybe I can't control what my Instagram shows me, but I can't control the amount of time I'm on there. Maybe I can't control the algorithm of Facebook, but I can control the amount of time I'm scrolling and listening and responding. Maybe I can't control what people are saying on social media, but maybe I don't have to comment and engage. Okay. Also creating boundaries, searching for balance, giving yourself and others a break. If I'm at a 5, I wonder where they are. Am I expecting them to be at an 8 too? Because some of the same things that we place on ourselves, we're placing onto other people. My person is grieving, or they may have experienced a loss. Am I expecting that they get over it because I know them? Am I having these judgments about them in my own mind? Am I frustrated with them? Giving yourself permission to feel all the things and then be compassionate enough to work your way out of that and then give space to them as you give space to yourself. Okay. Here are some tools and resources that I've included that I think are super helpful that go in conjunction with the talk that we had today. Therapy for Black girls, in case you're working with people who are looking for a therapist. Inclusive therapists, Psychology Today, clinicians of color. The Loveland Foundation is a great organization that does cohort of members where they give vouchers so that they can pay for therapy. And of course, if people have insurance or EAP program, My Therapy Cards is what we're going to dive more into on day 2 and 3. And then there's a book called Urban Trauma by Dr. Maisa Akbar and the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. I love that book to give out to clients as well. The Body Keeps the Score is great for people who have experienced trauma to the body because it teaches us like why these triggers are happening and makes sense of what the triggers are. And also, if you want to reference back to some of the food stuff that I talked about, this is Fear in the Black Body by Sabrina Strings. Okay. And if you want to connect with me, I'm on social media at Dr. Ebony Online. If you have a question from today's talk, I'm hello@drebony.com. And of course, you can go to drebony.com or mytherapycards.com to connect with me. And if there are any questions, this is the time that I want you to go ahead and put them up, as we have 8 minutes left in our talk. But I want to prepare you for what we're going to talk about tomorrow and Wednesday. We're actually going to do a deeper dive into the cards. We're going to talk about why I created the cards. We're going to talk about who can use the cards. We're going to talk about how to use the cards to combat things like grief, depression, anxiety. We're going to talk about who the cards are not for, moments to watch out for, how to use your own discretion, discernment, clinical judgment around the cards. We're going to talk about follow-up questions to the cards. We're going to break down each category. Tomorrow will be the mindset category, and we're going to go into the habits, and then we're going to finish up the third day with habits and triggers. After this is all done, you're going to get a guide that walks you through how to ask questions with the cards, where to start, and how to begin doing the work with your clients, how to introduce them with in session, how to introduce them to your family members. Because the great thing about my therapy cards is that they can be used with you, with people you're working with, and in your personal life. They're not so clinical, like, the CBT stuff that we get, or we may get a manual of some type of intervention that we'll never talk to our families about because they just would not understand or even be interested. These cards can be used anywhere. You can take them, once you have them, you can use them at work. You can use them for girls' night. You can use them for retreats. You can use them for company bonding, team building. You can use them for conversations with your kids. You can use them wherever. Okay, so that's what I really love about this, is that it's general enough to be used in so many different contexts. So any questions so far? Let's see. I didn't realize this was a 3-part series. I have appointments the next 2 days. How can I order cards incorporating my practice? Oh, I'm sorry, Lizette, about that. Yes, you can go to mytherapycards.com. But mytherapycards.com is going to take you to an overview of the cards, which I think is always helpful since you won't be here. So you can either go to mytherapycards.com, or you can go to mytherapycards.shop, which is the actual store where you would purchase the cards. But on mytherapycards.com, there's going to be a button that'll take you to the shop anyway. So either one of those, you're welcome. And so let me know if y'all have any questions. If there's anything in particular that you want to make sure I touch on over the next 2 days, this is the time to let me know, or you can email Erica and Erica will let me know so that I can build that into the talk before we actually get there. Okay. Any questions or comments, y'all? Questions or comments? Thank you, Lizette. You're welcome.
And feel free to unmute yourself and talk if you want. Put your voice in space. Some of you have met me over the past few weeks, and you know that I love to hear your voice in space.
I just want to say thank you again. All this information is definitely going to be useful in my practice. And my plan is to connect with you on social media. So don't forget my name.
Let me stop sharing my screen so I can see you. Who said that? Lizette?
Okay. Lizette. My camera is not the greatest, but
that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. Please connect with me. I love talking to folks on social media. I feel like I have some of the best connections from people I met on social media. So please feel free to find me there. And who you see is who you get. I do reels all the time, so I may act a little strange.
That's okay. I like strange.
Yeah, I love it. It's like a playground for me. So it's my way that I have joy and allow me to be creative in my business too, because I need that.
Awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So if there are no questions, Erica, what do you need? Or I see Tony came off. Okay.
Hi, Erica. She's so awesome. She just saw me last week. Dr. Ebony, I just want to say this was wonderful. I am a new victim advocate. So all of this is new information for me, but it's not new because I've been in therapy for so long. I feel like I know and have heard this stuff. I'm not on social media because it's just not my friend. Sorry about my loud dog. Raina. Okay, sorry. She's like a spoiled brat. But I wanted to ask, you were saying that the cards could be used for some people, but not for others. Can you go into that and explain?
Yeah, we'll cover that more tomorrow. I have two, so I understand the dog. But so for people who are actively suicidal, for instance,
Okay.
that's what I'm talking about. People who are actively psychotic or experiencing an episode of psychosis.
So people that are at risk right then, that are
right then
in crisis.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because we will come across those people, right? And so we need to know, like, hey, you might not need to be asking people who are in crisis, what have you done differently? What do you need to do differently that in this moment, we probably don't need to be asking that. The most important thing in that moment is getting them stabilized. And when they're stabilized, then we come back to the cards. And that's even for ourselves. If we're triggered and we have a trauma that is resurfacing, the thing that we need to do is settle, not go to the card and ask ourselves, what do you need to forgive yourself for?
Gotcha.
And I'll tell you more of the questions that come in.
That makes sense. I got you.
It can ramp up some other stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Looking forward to tomorrow.
Okay. I am too. Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I know we'll have more participants tomorrow, regardless.
Yeah.
Because even some of the NC Casa staff, they couldn't make it today, but they plan on coming tomorrow. So
okay.
I am excited to get this going. And like I said, you all, based on your agency and, you know, your clientele, who you want, if you would like the therapy cards that are for men or teens, please let me know, because the cards that you will be getting from these sessions are the women's deck.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there are any other questions for myself or Dr. Ebony, be sure to email us.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm hello@drebony.com. So just feel free to email me. And we're going to do the next days to talk about how the journals can be used with the cards too. And that'll be a group exercise that we'll get to.
We'll get one journal as well, so you can see that. And again, that'll be the women's journal.
Okay. Yeah. All right, y'all. Thank y'all. And I'll see y'all back here tomorrow. And I'll stay back, Erica, in case there's anything you need from me.
Okay. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora. Okay, that was great. What did you think about it?
I think that was great. I always get frustrated when I see so many people register and there are not so many people show up. Right on time.
Right on time. He was like, you said 1:30, 12:30, 2:30.
You said this. You need to come out of there right now.
You need to come take us outside. Right. So yeah, that happens so much. I know that's probably frustrating for you. It is frustrating. I'm so used to it, Erica, to be honest. Like, you can expect a third of the people who register to show up. Yeah. And that's just always how I do registration stuff. It is, you know, people don't know what they don't know. Like, you know, people will hear about it and they're like, oh, I wish I came, or things came up and we put things, you know, about taking care of ourselves. We put things on the calendar and we're like,